العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبه إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد صلاة تنجينا بها من جميع الأهوال والآفات وتقضي لنا بها جميع الحاجات وتطهرنا بها من جميع السيئات وترفعنا بها عندك على الدرجات وتبلغنا بها أقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات إنك على كل شيء قدير. صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So one of the brothers suggested that we talk about Dajjal. He actually had made the suggestion a while back and then I forgot. And he reminded me yesterday, so I said, well, we'll cover this. At least start with this and we'll go see where it leads, inshallah. So, Dajjal, Masih Dajjal, which means the appointed Dajjal or the anointed Dajjal, is the great deceiver. In English, they refer to him as the Antichrist, or the Christians refer to him as Antichrist. And anti here, which even a lot of people, a lot of Christians don't understand this either. Anti doesn't mean against Christ here. It means imposter, someone who is pretending to be. And that's what it means, for them. Dajjal, again, it means great deceiver. And, it's interesting that there are three things that all prophets in common told their people about. And of course, the first that we all know is La ilaha illallah. That there is no one worthy of worship except Allah. A lot of people know from the hadith also that the other thing that all the prophets told warned their people about was the fitna of Dajjal. So this is something not to be taken lightly. But we'll come back to that as well. And then the third thing which most of us forget about is that every prophet told their people about the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. And so when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions the fact that all the previous prophets had told their people about the coming of Dajjal, he says that, every prophet did this, and this, I am the last prophet, and there are no more prophets after me, so obviously he will come under this time. When we look at, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us many signs of the last day, what will happen before the end. And those signs can be split up into two groups. One which are referred to as the minor signs. Now the interesting thing about the minor signs are their generalities, or most of them, and these are signs that can recur. So, during one era they show up and then later they show up again, in various forms. And then you have the major signs. And these are signs that are absolute, and this is it. The first of the major signs of the last day is the coming of Imam Mahdi. So he is the first of those signs. But Dajjal is also included amongst those signs. Yeah. And the other interesting thing is, when we talk about shaitan, we are commanded before we recite the Quran, and so many times when we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, that I seek refuge with Allah from shaitanir rajim, the outcast, from shaitan, from his entity himself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about shaitan, aduwwun mubin, that he is an open enemy to you. But the interesting thing is that when Rasulullah talks about Dajjal, and he teaches us how to ask to have refuge from him, it's not from Dajjal himself. It's from the fitna of Dajjal. So this, the dua is, that, oh Allah, protect us from the fitna of Dajjal. Because Dajjal, as an entity, again, he's a deceiver. But the deception, the people that will accept his deception are the ones who are already diseased in the heart. Because this is also what we also know, is that every believer, anyone who has iman, which means that he believes in Allah as the Lord and Creator and Cherisher and Sustainer and all of the attributes of Allah as he should believe in Allah. And he believes in a Rasulullah with all of his attributes and characteristics, and believes in him appropriately, that he is the one who came with the knowledge of the unseen, who taught us this knowledge, who came with the authority over all of creation. And so anyone who believes in Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Dajjal will not be able to do anything to him, because he will see written on his forehead, kafir. And it's interesting here, the believer will see it and know what it says, even if he doesn't know how to read. The criteria for seeing it and reading it is that you have iman. Period. No one else will be able to even see it, much less read it. Okay. So, of course, when he comes, and he is this great deceiver, so a lot of people will fall for his deception. But before he comes, as I said, the first major sign of the last day is Imam Mahdi. So many things will happen. This great war will happen. And Rasulullah says that the conditions of the believers will be very bad. There will be no safety for the believer except in Mecca and Medina. So these two places, they will still be safe. Doesn't mean that the fitna won't be there, but at least they will be safe from all of the other aggressions and transgressions that will be going on. And again, these are things that we're seeing now, right? Because the fitna of Dajjal, Dajjal will not come in a vacuum. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And what that means is that there's nothing that happens, just by itself, right? So, there has to be things that allow certain things to happen. And we can look throughout history. Whenever some great fitna arose, it didn't just pop up suddenly. There was a whole system that allowed that fitna to come up that way, or that person who embodied that fitna to come up, and you look at like in the past, if I look at like Namrud, Fir'aun, all of these things, and I look at, not too far back, I look at Yazid. Yazid attaining the power or the position that he attained, again, that didn't just happen overnight. Many things happened before that allowed that to happen, that made it where people were accepting of that to happen. So there was a whole system there. Same thing with Dajjal comes. It's not just going to be that he comes and suddenly, everything changes. No. Everything will lead up to that, and then when he comes, and then you'll have the masses who will follow him and accept him, even though he's claiming to be God. Right? He's claiming to be God. And so part of that system that allows these situations to occur, allows these entities to, get in the position that they are, is that people forget what is good. And the concept of good and bad becomes all messed up. The nafs starts to take over. And then it becomes, whatever I think is good and whatever I think is bad. So it's all, and it all is on a whim. Like they have that woke movement. If you look at the woke movement these days, every day it's a different movement. Because this day, this is something that they want to engage in. And okay, that becomes old, and now we're going to engage in something else.
Convenient.
Yeah, convenience, matter of convenience. When this is convenient, when it's convenient, you can accuse people of certain crimes and say, oh, why are you doing this, right? But then when you yourself do it, or someone you befriend does it, oh, then that becomes okay. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So just whatever is convenient, and you can get a ruling for everything and anything. Yeah. Sometimes it's just a matter of asking the right person. Sometimes it's just a matter of paying them enough money. So again, the Dajjal being able to come in that position isn't just because, it just happened. The fitna, and again, we're seeing all of this now. You look at, because when the Dajjal comes, he will have with him, Rasulullah SAW told us that he will have with him paradise, and he will have with him hellfire. And whoever goes into his paradise, and these are metaphorical terms here, whoever goes into his paradise, in reality will be in the fire. And whoever goes into his fire, in reality will be in paradise. So you have, the concept of good and bad will be reversed. Right? And we see that happening now, right? Things that, if I talk to people even 30 years ago, right? And you say, if somebody did this, there's something really bad. And then now that it's happening in front of them, then, no, it's fine. And there are things that, in the past, that were considered abominations, right? I mean, commonly accepted as abominations. And now they become normal, to the extent that if you say something against them, you're the one, they say, something's wrong with you. So these are the things that will lead up. And then, you see where you can, when you single out a certain group of people, and just say something against them, make up something. And social media these days, you can say anything, and you're going to get following, right? And we see this, like after the wall, the communist wall fell. All these governments, they had to have a common enemy, and this is how governments work. You have to have a common enemy. You have to unite your people against an enemy. If there's no enemy, then the people will be paying attention to what you're doing, and that you won't be able to rip them off like you normally rip them off. So you have to have an enemy. So who became the enemy after the communists fell? Because you want to pick an enemy that most people don't know much about. And so that way you can feed them whatever you want. These people are like this, they do that. Feed them a bunch of lies and they'll believe you. So who became the common enemy? Islam became the common enemy. And Islam is still the common enemy now. And not just, and this, you look at this is global. You look at, again, I don't even have to name places. Just look, right? And someone does something, You know, it's interesting. You know, when someone else does something, it's, oh, he's crazy, he's mentally ill, or something like that. But if a Muslim or anyone, not even Muslim, he just has to have a name, right? Right? Just has to have the name. He does something, and suddenly it's representing the whole religion. So you have this double standard. And so again, all of these things are what are leading up to the coming of Dajjal. And that situation where no place will be safe for the believer except for Makkah and Medina. And as I said, the fitna will also be there though. But Dajjal will not be able to enter these places physically, right? Rasulullah has said in multiple narrations where he talks about that Dajjal, there are two things that will not be able to enter Medina Munawwara. Dajjal and the plague. Which is interesting because when COVID happened, they locked down everything. They know the hadith, right? They even locked down the Kaaba. Put a barrier around the Kaaba so the Kaaba couldn't get COVID. Right? But Rasulullah said, plague cannot enter Medina. Then why are you locking it down? Dajjal cannot enter Medina. Dajjal cannot enter Mecca physically. But his fitna will enter. And the way we know this also is because Rasulullah told us that in the dream he sees, and of course the dreams of the prophets are true, right? They're not like our dreams. Dreams of the prophet, every aspect of the prophets are true. And the dreams are true. So the prophets, so when Rasulullah he sees the dream, and he sees this man and he describes him. Fair complexion, you know, beautiful locks of hair that are dripping, freshly combed, and he's making tawaf with his arms, you know, on the shoulders of two men. And he says, this is Isa ibn Maryam, alayhi salam. And then he sees behind him this man with extremely curly hair, you know, short stature, thick neck, also making tawaf. And that is Masih ad-Dajjal. And also, we also know when Dajjal comes, and he will land, and Rasulullah described the area that he would land on, that he would come to. And if you look, that is the same place they built the airport right outside of Medina Munawwara. Okay, so he says he will come there. And there will be 3 earthquakes in Medina Munawwara. And because of the earthquakes, all of the hypocrites and all the people whose iman is not right will leave the city and come to Dajjal for safety. And whenever he will try to enter Makkah or Medina, Rasulullah told us, well, at that time we'll have 7 gates. And there will be 2 angels standing guard at each gate. And whenever he tries to enter, he will be knocked back. To the extent that in one narration, you know, Rasulullah mentions a specific mountain where Dajjal will come and he will look at the masjid of Rasulullah and he will ask, he says, why can I not enter this white castle? Which is also very interesting because if you look at the masjid of Rasulullah now, if you look at it at night with the lights on, what does it look like from a distance? Like a white castle. He says, why cannot I not enter this white castle? The interesting thing is, and there are many interesting things here, is this is the same place that they have built a compound and have a palace, so when the king or the crown prince comes to visit the area, that's where they can go and stay. Okay. So the locals call it the Dajjal compound. So the locals in Medina Munawwara refer to it as the Dajjal compound because this is where Rasulullah said that he would come. Again, all of these things that we've been told, we see them happening in front of us. The so many things, as far as like, Dajjal himself. Again, it's not Dajjal himself, but it's that fitna where, things will not be like they seem. This is what we were talking about. I mentioned briefly after Jummah. Normally you say seeing is believing. In this case, the deception that will be so deep that it will be very hard for people to discern this way. And we see this now with the deep fake. And you look at a video, and it can be so hard to tell, is it real or is it fake? Right? I mean, some of them, just unless you look at every fine detail, it looks so real. And then something comes up to the point now they have the AI generated actors, right? So everything, not everything is what it seems. And as time goes forward, most things will not be what they seem. And this is what it is, and this is what we're seeing now. And Rasulullah ﷺ told us this, that this age of deception, where the truthful will be considered untruthful, and the untruthful will be considered truthful. Again, wrong and right reversed. Everything is reversed. And this will be the norm. So if you say, and this is what he said again, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that at that time, having iman will be like holding a burning coal in your hand. And again, we see this, and we see how rapidly things have changed. I mean, you think about this, 200 years ago, right? And even 100 years ago. So from 200 years ago to 100 years ago, not much change, right? But, within the past 10 years, how many things have changed? And we see how things have accelerated. And not for the good. It's interesting, they talk about, all of this technology is going to free us up. When I was a kid, there was a cartoon called The Jetsons. And in that cartoon, what they showed was that, technology and everything, and you'll have robots doing your work, and you don't have to go to work. You just lay back and relax, and everybody's happy. What's happened though with technology? The opposite has happened. When you used to have a true 40-hour work week, and now because of your phone and your internet and email, you're constantly working. You wake up, first thing you do is look, how many messages did I get? I got to respond to this, I got to do this, I got to do that. And the last thing, even when you're going to sleep, that's the last thing you're doing. The whole day, right? So instead of freeing us up, it's enslaved us. And again, these are all of these things that are leading up to the physical manifestation of Dajjal. We already have his fitna here. And, coming back to the point of when he comes to Medina Munawwara, again, he will show the people many things, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow him to show the people many things, to the extent that when he's outside of Medina Munawwara, one of the greatest scholars will confront him. And he will say to the people, he says, if I kill him and bring him back to life, will you believe in me? And they will say yes. And he will kill him and bring him back to life, or at least it will appear to them that he did. And they will all believe him. And then that alim, that scholar, will say to the Dajjal, now I truly know that you truly are the Dajjal. And he will try to capture him to kill him again, but he will escape. To the extent also that he will kill a man and cut him into two pieces and spread him as far as Rasulullah described, as far as a person can shoot an arrow. So like 100 yards apart. and he will call him, and the man will come. So again, he will show all of these things. But those who have Iman will still be able to see Kafir. They will still see through his deception. And that is the criteria there. And the criteria also, Rasulullah also told us that those who have Iman before, when he comes, will have Iman, and those who don't will not have Iman. Which is why it's important for us to make sure that our Iman is right now, that we have the proper Iman now, so that when he comes, that will defend us. Okay? Rasulullah, the companions, they asked him, how long will he be on this earth? And Rasulullah, he says 40 days. Okay? The first day will be like a year. So when he says the 40 days, it's not like, a month and 10 days. He says the first day will be like a year. The next day will be like a month. The third day will be like a week. And then he says, and the remaining days will be like your days. Okay. So again, he's talking about this fitna being set up. The stages in which this fitna will be set up, so that when he comes physically, then it's like, everything is ready for him. Okay. So so many things about him, and again, we are taught to seek refuge from that fitna, right? Because if we get consumed by the fitna, then there is no saving us. Okay. He also said that he will come to every town and every city and every township. But he did not mention the villages. And he will travel like a cloud pushed by the wind. Which is interesting, because that indicates, flight, which also indicates plane. And he will go from country to country and place to place like this. Rasulullah also, in one narration, he talks about the mule that he will fly in. And if you look at the size, because there'll be certain cubits from one ear span to the other ear span, is talking about a fighter jet. Because he also said that mule will be made from iron. So it's not talking about a mule, but he's having to talk to his companions in terminology that they can also understand. But anyone who comes later will also be able to understand. And we see this so many times when Rasulullah is describing things to come. He'll use terminology that, they can understand at that time, but people later will also, this is what this means. We understand this. So it's interesting, like when you see planes flying also, what are they leaving behind? The trails, which look like clouds. Okay. One time, the Rasulullah had told the companions about Dajjal in the morning. So that morning he talked about Dajjal, and he described Dajjal and all of the fitna. And this is a special thing about the companions of Rasulullah. When they're hearing it from Rasulullah, for them this is reality. It's like it's happening now. Our hearts are diseased, so it's just, we just kind of brush it off. But for them, it was a reality. And not just any reality, it was happening in front of them. So when Rasulullah is warning them about Dajjal, it's as if they're seeing Dajjal and he's here now. What do we do? So later that day, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam meets them again, and they're all very upset, noticeably upset. And they say, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what will we do? You talked about the Dajjal, what are we going to do? And he says to them, he says that if he comes while I am still here, so if he comes, before the passing of Rasulullah, Rasulullah says, I will deal with him through reasoning for you. I will deal with him. But if he comes after me, then every man will be responsible for himself. But those who are believers, Allah will protect them on my behalf. Meaning on the behalf of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because of their love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect the believers from the fitna of Dajjal. But before he said this, he said, there are many things that I fear for you more than Dajjal. So we talk a lot about Dajjal, but we forget about all those other things, which are important things to note. And this is one of the last things that he also mentioned before he passed, was that he says to the people, he says, oh people, I don't fear that shaitan will be worshipped in this land again. But I fear that the world will come to you and you will run after it. And this is exactly what is going on in the Muslim world. So that the world has come to us, and now we neglect all of the obligations, which is interesting because there are not that many obligations technically. The Quran can be spread out into, from a linguistic standpoint, 5 different knowledges. First one being ilm al-ahkam, which is the knowledge of the do's and the don'ts. But if you look at that, of the 6,666 verses, barely 500 verses of the Quran deal with ahkam. So not even a tenth of the Quran. All right. And this, unfortunately, is what we when we're telling someone non-Muslim about Islam, this is what we tell them. All right. I mean, this is what, see, in Islam we do this and we do this and we don't do this. Well, yeah, those are fine, but there's something even before that, which is the iman. So, but then you have ilm al-maqasid wal-rad, which is the knowledge of refuting things. This is the vast majority of the verses of the Quran that deals with, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reasoning with the people of the book, or refuting the people of the book, or reasoning with the mushrikeen, or refuting the mushrikeen, or reasoning someone else with someone else, or refuting the beliefs of someone else. This is the vast majority of the Quran. Okay. Then you have ilm al-tazkir bi-ayyamullah, the knowledge of the days of Allah, which are the days of His mercy and the days of His wrath. So the days that His mercy descends and the days that His punishment descends, which in general are the same day. Because for one group, it is mercy, for the other group, it's the punishment. And we see this like, a simple example of this is, with Fir'aun and Musa alayhi salam, right? And then you have ilm al-tazkir bi'ala'illah, the knowledge of the favors of Allah. So you have the knowledge of the days of Allah and you have the knowledge of the favors of Allah. And both of these two knowledges are what we celebrate when we celebrate the Mawlid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because the greatest favor of Allah is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the greatest day is the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent His beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam to us. And then you have the knowledge of what will happen after the death. So that includes the knowledge of the last day, the knowledge of the hereafter, all of this. And so what we're talking about now are when we talk about Dajjal, are the things to come before the last day, or the signs of the last day. Okay. So, again, so one of the things that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned that he fears for us more than Dajjal, or the fitna of Dajjal, is again, the world coming to us and us chasing after it. And if you look at the Muslim world today, doesn't matter, we're talking young to old, poor or rich. The whole mindset these days is what? It's the dunya. When you truly love something, then you always want to hear about that thing, and you want to always be talking about that thing. When we look at the companions of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, whether they were poor or rich, and no one's wealth today can compare to the wealth of Abdurrahman bin Auf radiallahu anhu. 500 years he'll be spending giving account because of his wealth. He will enter Jannah 500 years after the rest of the companions of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, because he'll be giving account for his wealth. All right. Yet when you look at them, when you see them, when you read about them, the wealth didn't matter to them. Allah gave them, and they spent appropriately. They earned lawfully. They spent lawfully. But that was not the center of who they were, or what they did, or what they even spoke about. If you see, anyone comes, they talked about Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That was the center of and focus of their lives. Because they weren't chasing after the dunya. The dunya was chasing after them, but they were kicking it away. Yeah. And so we see today, where we see so many people getting caught up in this fitna, and in various forms, so many people losing their iman. And then you have those who lose their iman who don't even know they've lost their iman. It's interesting because there are hadiths, and not just one or two hadiths, but several hadiths, where Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he talks about Dajjal. And he talks about the Khawarij. And the way we know he talks about the Khawarij, he says that people will come who will recite the Quran so beautifully, but it will not get below their collarbones. So we know this is the Khawarij, right? These are the people who have issues with the household of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The true definition of Khawarij is the one who has issues with the household of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The governments these days have tried to translate Khawarij as, anyone who's against the Muslim government, or the so-called Islamic government, or the Muslim ruler. No. The Khawarij, if you look at their origins and what Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has told us, these were the enemies of Ali, karamallahu wajh. That is how they formed. That was their whole basis for forming. Okay? So he said that these people will come, and the Quran will not get below their collarbones. And he says, and when they come, kill them. And then he says it again, and when they come, kill them. He says that 20 times. And then he says, and then the Dajjal will arise from them. So, a lot of us Muslims, we think of Dajjal as someone, that will arise from, some non-Muslim group, or a group that doesn't claim to be Muslim. And yet Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is telling us that he will arise from these people who recite the Quran, but it will not get below their collarbones. Who's going to be reciting the Quran? The Muslims. This is also why we see this today, and we will, and perhaps some of us who, if we are around, will see this then. So many people that will be labeled as Muslim will fall for this fitna. Because again, we see the fitna now, right? And Rasulullah SAW describing the Khawarij as to how beautifully they recite the Quran. Telling the companions, and not just any companions, he's telling Umar ibn Khattab, Umar the son of Khattab. Khattab was from Khatib. He was such an eloquent speaker. Umar radiallahu is also an eloquent speaker. Umar radiallahu is one of the few people in Mecca who knew how to read and write before Islam. He is one of the few Arabs who could pronounce the dad properly from both sides of his mouth. Dad, even for native Arabic speakers, they will tell you that is the most difficult sound to make properly. He's telling him, you will be ashamed of your recitation. He's telling Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh, he is, Hafs, which is the qiraat or the tajweed that most 95% of the Muslim world use to read the Quran with. If you look at the lineage of Hafs bin Asim as far as teachers to teachers, it goes back to Ali karamallahu wajh. He's telling him, you will be ashamed of your recitation when you hear these people. And then he goes on about how you will be ashamed of your salah, or your salat will seem insignificant and your fasting will seem insignificant, right? And he says, they will recite the Quran, but it will not get below their collarbones, meaning nothing will truly enter the heart. So we see this fitna now. And these are the same people who, are always trying to find fault with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And most people don't even recognize that they're doing this, because they do this under the disguise of protecting Tawheed. So we see how many people have fallen for this fitna now. I don't even have to take names, because it should be very obvious, right? So, of course, when Dajjal comes, again, he will come after Imam Mahdi. But Imam Mahdi will still be there. So, from what we have been told from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that, of course, conditions will be very severe for the believers. And again, there will be no peace or security for the believers, right? Until finally Imam Mahdi comes. And he will eventually arrive in Medina Munawwara. He will be accused of various things. An army will be sent against him, which will have 80 flags, and under each flag, 12,000 soldiers, which means 960,000 million man army. The army will come from Sham. It will be dispatched from Sham. So you have a coalition. This is a coalition army, 80 flags. All these countries getting together for one man. And when they dispatch, he will go from Medina to Makkah Mukarramah. And then in Makkah, as he's reciting the Quran, the people will recognize him that, oh, this is the Mahdi. His actual name will be Muhammad ibn Abdullah. So his father's name will be Abdullah, his mother's name will be Amina. And his name will be Muhammad, after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His character will be a direct representation of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Physically, he will have a broad forehead and a prominent nose. So his features will be distinct. When the people recognize him as the Mahdi, and they will force themselves upon him for him to take allegiance from them, and he will eventually take allegiance from them. He is not one looking for a position or fame or anything. He is one who has been running from position and fame his whole life. But then he cannot ignore what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills for him to do. So he will lead the believers, and then that army will eventually be destroyed that will come against him. And then he will go to Constantinople, which of course we know today, modern day Istanbul. He will conquer Istanbul, or Constantinople, which also tells us that that means that that area will be back in the hands of those who truly have no faith. But he will conquer it in a very different way. There will not be any physical fighting. He will go and he'll say takbir, and one of the walls will fall, and he'll say takbir again, and the other wall will fall, and he'll say takbir again, and another wall, and takbir again, and another wall, and he will enter the city, which tells us that the people there will be ready and wanting for him to come, waiting for him to come, because they will accept him wholeheartedly when he enters. Then there will be a rumor spread that Dajjal has come and taken his place amongst the family, so his army will come back out. And when they come out, they'll find out that, oh, that was a false rumor. But immediately after that, then he will actually come and start spreading, or start consolidating his fitna. Because the fitna will already have been set. He will start consolidating everything. So as he's consolidating everything, this is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send Isa alayhi salam. And so this is, so one of my sons was talking to one of the kids in his high school, and he mentioned that, Islamically, we know that Isa alayhi salam will come back, and he was in shock, because a lot of these guys are taught that, oh, the Muslims are trying to keep Isa alayhi salam from coming back, astaghfirullah, right? So, but his question, which was a good question from a non-Muslim standpoint, was, why Isa alayhi salam and why not Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Which is a question that many people think about. Okay? Because, and the reason for that is, one is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has perfectly completed his mission. Isa alayhi salam, and he has completed his mission, and he has tasted death. He didn't eat death, he tasted it. There's a huge difference in eating something and tasting something. Okay. Isa alayhi salam has not tasted death. Plus, Dajjal will be this imposter claiming to be God. And you have all of these people that claim to be Christians who believe Isa alayhi salam is God. So when Isa alayhi salam comes, his mission is now to destroy Dajjal, but his coming, his presence itself will start doing that. Because now people will be able to see, oh, this is the true Isa, and he is not God. All right? So this is the true Isa, Ibn Maryam, Isa the son of Maryam alayhi salam, and he's not God. He's not even claiming to be God. And so when Dajjal sees him, he will melt away. When Dajjal initially, when Isa alayhi salam initially confronts Dajjal, it will be in Jerusalem. And as soon as he sees him, he'll start, Rasulullah said that he will start to melt away. And then he will run. And then Isa al-Islam will catch up with him in a place called Lud. So Lud today, the area that's really being described is the airport in modern day Tel Aviv. And then there, Dajjal will melt away like salt melts or disappears in water. Because now everything will become clear. All right. So this is, I guess, and that will be the end of Dajjal. There are. So one of the questions that arises that some people ask is that, well, will Dajjal be punished on the Day of Judgment? There will be no Dajjal being raised on the Day of Judgment. The Dajjal is Masih Dajjal. That is a point. That is his purpose. That is his purpose. That is what he was created for. So he, dissolved on the seeing of Isa alayhi salam. And that will be it for him. Shaitan is a different issue. Because Shaitan, he was given that choice. He could have prostrated to Adam alayhi salam as he was commanded, but he chose not to. So that's a totally different category. Which kind of gets back to the point of we seek refuge from the fitna of Dajjal, but we also seek refuge from Shaitan. Because Shaitan chose to be Shaitan and chose to spread that his fitna. And as far as the place that he will arise from, Rasulullah refers to a place between Sham and Iraq, and towards the east. And some scholars, there are people that say that, oh, this is Iraq, Kufa, that area. But there are other scholars who say that this is Riyadh. Because if you look directly east of Medina Munawwara is Riyadh. And again, it's the same people that are spreading that fitna. Because, it's interesting when you talk about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, if you love someone and you talk about them and you praise them, anyone who loves him and praise and loves him, when he hears that, will be very happy, right? But anyone who has an issue with him is the one who's going to be upset. Oh, no, you can't, that's not right, you can't do this, all of this. So those people, when you start praising Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who have issues with you praising Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you know which category they fall into. And these are the people that are now ruling over so many of the so-called Muslim countries. As usual, I'm sure I've overlooked a lot of things because there's so much more. But any questions?
They say that he is locked up right now.
Yeah, so the thing is that it's said that he is locked up. So there's a companion of Rasulullah, Tamim ad-Dari, who is from Sham. So he was initially Christian, and he came to and accepted Islam in Medina Munawwara. And when he accepted Islam, he told Rasulullah about this journey that he had. And then Rasulullah asked him to tell everybody else, because what he was saying, would affirm to them what Rasulullah had already told them about Dajjal. So the thing is with Tamim radiallahu anhu, he was a sailor. And so again, he's from Sham. Because there are people who try to say that this island is probably over, somewhere in the Indian Ocean, somewhere over there. And then there are others who say it's someplace else. But, just knowing where Tamim radiallahu anhu is from, it would make sense that he was probably in the Mediterranean Sea. Okay. And his ship got caught in a storm, and they were tossed around for a month. So it wasn't just any storm. They were tossed around for a month until they came, they could see an island from where they were. So, and so some of them got off on, the lifeboats that most ships would have, or small boat, because, a big ship, you can't go to the coast. So they got off on a small boat and they go to the coast. And when they come onto the island, they see this very hairy person. And there are those who say, and they ask him, "Who are you?" And he says, "Jasasa." So the name of this creature that they said was just very hairy, or this person, his name is Jasasa, which is from jasus, spy. And so there are some people that say that maybe this was England, because they're famous for their spies. And it would make sense from the standpoint that he's tossed around in the Mediterranean for a month. They could eventually end up over there. But, Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam know best. So when they arrive, they ask him who he is. He says, Jasasa, and he looks at them and he says that my master wants to meet you. So Tamim radiallahu anhu says that he took them to this temple, and when they entered, they see this creature, very strong and powerful, whose hands are tied to his neck. Okay. And he's sitting and he's in this cage. He's kind of imprisoned within the cage. And when he sees them, he asks them where they're from. And then he starts asking them questions. And he asks about certain areas, about whether they give palm trees or whether they give fruit or not, if the fruit, if the trees there bear fruit or not, about certain place, whether there's water or not, and stuff. And I don't remember the whole exact, but these are certain places where if you start looking, they're in that area of what was then Sham. So it includes Philistine and Jordan and these areas. And some of those areas are not giving fruit anymore because of everything that's going on. So then after he asked, because he had asked, is this place giving fruit? And they said yes. And he said, soon it will not. And then he asked about the water, and they said, it's a place, does it have water in it? And he said, yes. And he said, yeah, soon it won't. And then he asked about, has the messenger in Arabia, has he arrived? Has he come? And of course, Tamim radiallahu anhu, even though he's not Muslim at this point, but he's heard about what's going on there, because Sham and Makkah used to have a lot of trade. So, news spread. So has this man come? And he said, yes. And then he says to him, interesting, he said, it would be good for you if you followed him. So just like Shaitan sometimes gives it good advice, Dajjal is also giving good advice here. So of course, they're kind of shaken up from this, and they eventually leave. And so this is what Tamim radiallahu anhu tells, everybody. And there's another hadith where Rasulullah, he mentions Dajjal in a certain place, and then he says, no, he's here, and then he says, no, he's here, and then eventually where he will rise from the east, which also tells you that the center of that fitna will keep moving. And this is what we've seen. We see how they've enslaved the world through their monetary system, right? Where you keep poor countries poor. You make countries very wealthy that you want to make wealthy. Because this is another one of the things of Dajjal, that when he comes, whoever opposes him, their crops will fail. Their livelihood will be gone. And those who support him, their crops, there'll be abundant rain and all of this, a vast, produce and everything. So, and again, this is what we're seeing now, which is interesting because even, it's become more commonly known that now they have ways of manipulating, weather. Yeah. And there's so many things that, someone does something they don't like and suddenly, oh, there's a flood. Hadn't flooded there in 20 years and suddenly there's a flood.
Even the earthquakes.
Yeah, and the earthquakes, right? Oh, we don't like those people. Convenience. So again, Rasulullah SAW told us this is what Dajjal is going to do. And we see that fitna. Any other questions?
Yagog and Magog.
Yajuj and Majuj. So Gag and Magog. Gog and Magog in English. These are people that are referred to in the Quran that Dhul Qarnayn walled off. So if you read Surah Kahf, they're mentioned in there. And so they, these were people that came down, and you had to, because in his travels, in the travels of Dhul Qarnayn, he comes across a people that are very decent, and so they ask him or say to and tell him about these people that come down from a certain area and they just wreak havoc over the land and kill people and everything. So they ask him for help. And he asked them for help. He says, I want your help, your strength to help me, and I will build this wall. So he builds this wall that he basically with copper parts, metal wall, and then he pours lead on top of that to solidify it, to keep these people from coming through, and to protect these decent people. And so that wall has remained for many generations. And then Rasulullah SAW at one time he says, Wailul lil Arab. Woe unto the Arabs. And he says that a hole has formed in that wall, and I see the destruction of the Arabs. Because this is also another thing, is that he was asked, as far as like when Imam Mahdi and Dajjal come, there will not be very many Arabs left. Even if you look at like the population of the Arabs today globally, it's not that huge. The vast majority of people that are Muslim are not Arab. Indonesian, subcontinent, Turkish, far outnumber the Arabs, even today. But at that time, even fewer Arabs. And so, when Imam Mahdi, and I guess just kind of cover a few aspects of Imam Mahdi will be from the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. On his father's side, he will be from the lineage of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. On his mother's side, the lineage of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And he, when he rules, and the rule will come after, because there'll be the huge battle between Dajjal's army and the army of Imam Mahdi and Isa alayhi salam. Okay. After Dajjal is destroyed, then Yajuj and Majuj will become apparent. They'll show themselves and start causing all this destruction, right? And it's interesting that they will also say that we have killed all of those on the earth, now let's also kill those in the heavens. You know, and whether they will be referring to people on the space station or some demented idea of killing the angels, you know, or somebody on Mars, I don't know. Okay? But that's what they will say. And so Isa alayhi salam will take the people and they will run off into the mountains because these people will be everywhere. You know, Ya'juj and Ma'juj will be everywhere, creating havoc, just killing people, destroying everything, you know, using up all of the resources. You know, the Sea of Galilee, Lake of Tabrizi will become dry. So all of these things will happen. And so then, and the believers with Isa alayhi salam and Mahdi alayhi salam will not be able to fight against them because they're just so overwhelming. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send something that will strike their necks and they will die. And then when the believers come down from the places that they were hiding, I mean, not a place, you know, where you could put your hand that there won't be one of their bodies laying. Yeah, everything just like this. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send birds whose necks will be like the necks of camels, that will take these people and dump them wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to be dumped, probably in the ocean or wherever. And then He will send a rain that will wash away all of the filth and debris. And so this will be when Imam Mahdi rules, and during his rule there will be no kufr, and there will be no oppression. So all of oppression will be wiped out, all of disbelief will be wiped out. Until he passes, and then when he passes, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send the wind that will take all of those who have belief, and then basically whose imans were corrupted during that time period will remain, and then eventually, you know, the end will come. Yeah. So we'll end here, inshallah. Okay, so we'll end here today, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from this fitna, and allow us to be amongst those that are able to see the word kafir on the forehead of Dajjal, and allow us to be amongst those that will have the honor of fighting in the army of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, and to be amongst those that will be in his army and remain steadfast within his army, because there will be those who will abandon his army. So we don't want to be those. We want to be those who will remain steadfast within his army. And may he give us strength and iman and his true love, and the true love of his beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom he loves. And may he give strength and victory to our brothers and sisters that are being oppressed, wherever they are being oppressed, over their oppressors, and allow us to be useful to them. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.